The major question of the Gilded Age is whether the industrialist philanthropists who created so much wealth were robber barons, that is, they were unscrupulous, unethical people who took advantage of the wealth created by others, while those others, their workers, lived in poverty, or were they captains of industry, great heroes in American history who created wealth for themselves and others, who raised the country's standard of living, and who made America a better place to be. Although this is a great question of the Gilded Age, there are parts of it that are really not up to question. Industrial improvements, improvement in business strategies, and one of these focuses around steel. So let's start with steel. First, for the United States to have a revolution in the process of making steel, we have to have the natural resources. And this map clearly shows where the largest deposits of iron ore that can be turned into steel are, and the United States had very abundant supplies of iron ore for creating. Additionally, although steel had been made for many, many centuries, there was a process created by Henry Bessemer called the Bessemer process that made it much more efficient, much more quick, and much cheaper to produce steel. With the Bessemer process put into U.S. factories, U.S. steel becomes much cheaper to create. Thus, skyscrapers based with steel girders can be made, allowing more people to live in a relatively small area. Iron rails on trains are turned into steel rails that can support more weight and make it so trains can be both longer and heavier. And lastly, large expansion bridges like the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. The Brooklyn Bridge in New York can be made, connecting areas across bays or very large rivers, again making it possible for a larger population to live in a relatively small area. There are some interesting asides though with this entire process. As you can see in this picture, the part of the picture down at the bottom, where iron ore is being melted, rocks essentially are being melted and poured in a lava-like substance to make steel, you can see the people shoveling the coal into the furnace, undoubtedly hundreds of degrees, or right next to it shoveling in. This person appears to be stirring the molten iron ore, turning into steel close to it. This person's just up there kind of pushing it over. One of the things to remember, what we think of as a safe workplace, those laws created by the federal agency OSHA, that doesn't happen until the 1930s. Not only are many workplaces unsafe, they are very dangerous, and it's not uncommon in the late 19th and early 20th centuries for there to be serious injuries or even deaths at America's workplace. One of the individuals most associated with the Gilded Age, and seen either as a captain of industry or a robber baron, depending on your beliefs, is Andrew Carnegie. Andrew Carnegie utilizes vertical integration to buy up iron ore mines, to control railroads, to make steel. And when he sells his company to J.P. Morgan, United States Steel, it becomes at that time the first company worth $1 billion. Recall also that Carnegie is a noted philanthropist. In his essay, The Gospel of Wealth, he wrote that he believed that certain people were deigned by God to be very wealthy because they had greater abilities. But Carnegie said they also have a responsibility to give their money, all of their money, back to society to make it better. Recall that in this Gospel of Wealth, Carnegie stipulated, the man who dies wealthy dies in disgrace. Indeed, Carnegie, among many things, contributed money to build hundreds of libraries across the United States. As you can see, this shows how much the Bessemer process and the growth of factories influenced the creation of steel. You can see that the first graph is from 1879 to 1880, and the second 1889 to 1890. Thus, you can see there is a significant increase in the amount of steel produced in the United States. And you can also see that Pennsylvania cements its place as by far the #1 producer of steel in the United States. Thus, today, the NFL sports team in Pennsylvania, in Pittsburgh, is still called the Steelers. The major component for steel is iron ore. You can see that in 1870, near the beginning of the Gilded Age, the United States is near the bottom. Certainly Great Britain outproduces it dramatically. But by 1913, as we're moving towards the end of the Gilded Age, the United States is not just the leader in the producer of iron ore, it is by far the leader in the producer of iron ore. Similarly, the United States becomes by far the leader in the producer of steel during this time period. And if we take a step back and look to see, well, where does steel compare to other products? For example, in 1890, 68% of all of our exports are agricultural products, whereas in 1913, that's down to 36%. In 1890, just 3% of our exports are iron ore, which more than quadruples up to 13%, just about a quarter of a century later. And also, manufacturing goes from just 3%, almost quadrupling up to 11%, thus showing the effects of the rapid manufacturing improvement and the rapid increase in size of manufacturing in the United States between 1890 and 1913. Thus, when we try to understand the importance of industry in the Gilded Age, steel is one of the most important industries that improve and one of the most important ones that has effect in creating what we think of as the modern United States.